All right, in the last section, what we were looking at was how Darwin kind of arrived at his theory of evolution and all of the influences that he had on him, and the different people that were involved, and Alfred Russel Wallace, the other naturalists that were kind of doing the same thing. But the main thing that Charles Darwin was able to do that many of the others that were kind of looking at how life changes as a result of interacting with the environment was he was able to convince the other biologists, people in the scientific community, that what he was saying really was true was because of the reasoning and the logic and the overwhelming amount of evidence that he had that kind of supported this thing. He took long period of time, in excess of really of 20 years to kind of develop this theory, and as a result of that just kept almost putting it off because he was accumulating so much evidence from a whole variety of different types of organisms to kind of support the idea. And what his publication really presented was two main kind of lines of thought. And one, that evolution was able to explain the unity and diversity of life, how all of the organisms were kind of related in some way, shape, or form. And really, the more closely related they are, how similar they are to one another. And right along with that, really, how different organisms are, the vast diversity of life. How this arises as a result of interacting with the organisms and the environment that they're in. And then the other main idea was that natural selection is the cause of this adaptive evolution. The organisms change as a result of interacting with their environment. So the main ideas of natural selection really is that natural selection is the differential reproductive success of individuals and their traits. In other words, those individuals that are more fit for survival are able to have more offspring, and those offspring are likely to contain the traits that they have that are making them successful, and these are the ones that are going to get passed on. And then through time, natural selection is going to increase those adaptations of those organisms to the particular environment. They're going to be more camouflaged, they're going to be better at evading prey, or they're going to be better at catching prey, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of different types of things that are going to kind of come about as a result of the organisms kind of interacting with their environment and giving rise to more offspring. And then the idea too is that if the environment changes or an individual moves from one location to another, natural selection might kind of alter the adaptations that those organisms have to the new environment. And perhaps a new species will result from that, or the species itself will change in a way that makes it better adapted to its environment. Okay, so there's a video here that kind of shows this. This is video 1, and it will be a link to this video will be posted underneath the thing on the website. And I want you guys to watch that, and you'll kind of see how a particular type of praying mantis, and some of you may have seen them around here, well, in the environment that it's in where the scientist goes, you can see how it really comes to take on the look of a leaf of a plant, and it really camouflages or blends in, becomes more adapted to the environment, better able to kind of blend in and avoid predation from predators that want to eat it. Okay, so the main points really arising from natural selection is that natural selection occurs through individuals and the environment. So the interaction of the organism with the environment, like we've been talking about, and it's important too, like we mentioned in class, to keep in mind that individuals themselves don't evolve. Individuals possess the traits that make them more or less able to really kind of deal with the environmental factors that it finds itself in, and as a result of that can pass those traits on, or is more likely to pass those traits on if it's more kind of suited for its environment. And then the population then is the smallest unit that can evolve. So the changes occur within the population as a result of kind of the shift, and we'll talk more about this shift in the next chapter, just depending on how the organism as a whole, the population of organisms, how they're interacting with their environment. And the evolution itself is measured as changes in the relative proportions of this heritable variation in a population over multiple generations, like we talked about in the lab that we did with the bead frequencies and so forth. That population may evolve as a result of the genes, the number of genes, the number of alleles within that population as they change, and they're changing as a result of the organisms that have them and how well they're interacting with their environment and how many offspring they're giving rise to, more or less. And the more offspring that they do give rise to, the more, fit you say those individuals are, and the more that population is going to change to reflect those alleles that are becoming more and more common. And natural selection, therefore, is going to amplify those heritable traits, like we were just saying, for reasons we just discussed, and certainly not the acquired characteristics. You know, a more fit individual, a more muscular individual, something like that, isn't necessarily going to pass those traits on, because that is something that could have been acquired as a result of working out, say, along the way and so forth. Okay, and natural selection is always operating. It's always working on the organisms. The organisms are always interacting with their environment, but the traits that are favored is going to, of course, depend on the environment, again, for reasons like we were just discussing. Okay. So now the other thing I want you to do, in addition to watching the videos, I want you to use your computer, your phone, whatever, and I want you to find 2 examples of the evolution of domesticated animals and just be able to explain those. We'll talk about these in class and kind of trade ideas and thoughts, because I'm sure there's many examples, so I'm sure we'll all have different ones that we'll discuss. Okay? And then I want you to go to this next video here and look. It's video 2, and there'll be a link to it again underneath this presentation. And I want you to watch the whole thing, and I want you to see how the interaction of these rock pocket mice with their environment is going to really result in a bunch of changes in the genome of the organism, and they'll talk to you about how those changes occurred, how they were measured, and really the results of these. And this does a very good job of showing how these particular animals in the wild are kind of their coloration is a product of the environment that they're living in. Okay, and we're going to definitely discuss this as well. And the key points kind of arising from this is that natural selection is an editing process and not a creative mechanism. It's going to work on the variation that's there and the variation that kind of comes about as a result of potential mutations and so forth. And natural selection is going to depend on the time and the place. And what it's doing is it's favoring these characteristics within that variable population. So there's a whole bunch of different types of alleles that are present in the population, and it's going to favor the ones that are best suited for that environment at the time. Like, for instance, in the video, the organisms range in coloration from being dark gray to very light tan, and that variation is what's being worked on as a result of natural selection. And with the black background from the lava flow, if you're a very light colored rock pocket mouse, you're more apt to get eaten by a predator. And if you're more of the charcoal or dark colored, you're going to blend in, you're less likely to be eaten. And vice versa is also true. In the areas where there isn't the dark lava, if you're dark colored, you're more likely to get weeded out of the population to predation. And if you're a lighter colored, kind of tan blending in with the background, you're more likely to survive and pass those genes on. So that video does a good job of kind of illustrating these types of things. So we'll certainly talk about those in class as well. And then this is the link for video 3 that will be pasted underneath this, and I want you to go through and watch this. And this shows you really how the HIV virus can change within particular people that have it based on the drug cocktail that they're given. For the same types of reasons, the environment that this virus is in is changing, and as a result of that, the virus is changing with it to kind of stay one step ahead of the drug cocktails that they're being given. So again, we'll talk about this one in class, but it does a good job of illustrating natural selection just in a different mode that inside the human body without it's changing in result to a virus. Okay, so take a look at those videos. Make sure you're ready to discuss them in class, and we'll see you soon.